Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, but for this video we need a helmet in the background. So let me okay, I'm gonna have to move my Commodore 64. Oh, but Metatron, we really liked the Commodore 64. What if you want to see more of this sort of retro tech? Go subscribe to my third channel, Don't Be a Muppet, link in the description. I post daily on that channel, daily on my second channel about languages, and daily here. Lots of content, thank you. Okay, good. Looks like it's staring at you. Okay, the video that I would like to check out with you today is called What It Was Like to Be a Knight During Medieval Times, and it's found on Weird History, was posted 5 years ago. Metatron. Always on top of that content when right after it's big. Well, at least no one is going to complain that I'm reacting to it.
When we think of knights during the medieval times, we think of valiant men who chose to defend their honor in feats of jousting, chivalry, and dragon slaying. That's not exactly how it was for the actual knights. Jousting wasn't always a part of the culture of being a knight. Chivalry was less of how to be a gentleman and more of a list of what not to do. And dragons weren't real, no matter how much we wish they were.
You're wrong. Dragons, dragons are absolutely real. Shad proved it on his video. Settled.
Today we're exploring what it was actually like to be a knight during medieval times.
Please.
Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. Oh, and while you're there, leave a comment and let us know what topics you would like to hear about.
Yes, leave a comment.
So gather ye at thy round table, and togethereth we shall commence.
Most
There
days
weren't a
begin
lot
with
of
mass.
options for other religions, so almost everyone that lived in medieval Europe was Catholic, or at least they claimed to be. Everyone from kings and queens to the lowly peasants and serfs were expected to take part in their religious duties, be it here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm being a little pedantic here. It's true that the majority, I want to say, of Europeans, although then again, Middle Ages is such a massive span of time that, you know, in the early Middle Ages were different than the late Middle Ages, but still, it's absolutely correct that I would say the majority of Europeans would have been Catholic at this time. Important to say, though, that there were not only still people that were following pagan religions that predated the arrival of Christianity in Europe, but also, most importantly, there were other forms of Christianity that weren't Catholic, even before the Protestant Reformation. It's just that some of these, of course, had such minimum numbers in comparison to the Roman Catholic faith that clearly oftentimes he's not wrong by saying that most people were Catholics. And also there were other forms of Christianity that got crusaded on. So there is that.
Yearly or daily. Knights were certainly included in this, and they were known to start their days with a morning mass at their local church.
Right.
Nowadays, we would say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But back then, feeding the Christian soul was considered more important.
Okay, let's have a look at this image for a second so that we get a daily morning of pedantic Metatron. Right, so one of the reasons why I usually don't use images like this, and I try to use iconography. I used to, by the way, this is something I changed, so this is from 5 years ago, not an attack, maybe they don't do it anymore, but the reason why I usually don't is because oftentimes these drawings are unfortunately incorrect and they tend to push myths. And the best way to avoid that is in fact to use, just use period iconography, and there are lots of websites that you can use to do that. I'll show you one that I particularly like in a second. But before we do that, so what's wrong with this image? Well, the male is actually not bad. Look at how close fitting it is under his chin. So the male coif, the male sleeve, these look really good. So the artist in question knew how to draw male correctly. The only trouble I have here is this idea of the big, massive red cross in the middle of the chest, which is really not a thing. We do have descriptions from period sources, specifically from the Catholic Church, including papal bulls, that tell us that in reality Templars and, I want to say, Crusaders did wear the cross, but it was small and it was over the heart, possibly on the left, even though we do know that the heart is in the middle of the chest, only pointing left. I think here that we're going with the idea of, well, my heart is on the left type of thing, what have you. But that would be a better and more coherent representation of the Crusader cross, if you will. Not a huge thing, but something that I personally, that's one of the reasons why I personally prefer to use period iconography.
Nowadays, we would say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But back then, feeding the Christian soul was considered more important.
I think it depends who you're asking, to be honest, because, I mean, there are plenty of very, very practicing Christians that, would still answer the same way, I suppose, as medieval people. Let me show you that website that I was talking about. Manuscripts and miniatures. You're gonna love this if you don't know about it. So here it is. So this website is fantastic if you are either doing research for medieval stuff and you want to look through iconography, but maybe you've been using Google or Wikipedia and sometimes you don't find what you want, or if you're making content that is historical in nature. This is fantastic because this website contains so many publicly available, so public domain images from the period. As you can see, miniatures 16,194, manuscripts 1,526, so a lot of these are illuminations, and then from 19 countries. So what's amazing is that you can do a search or tags. If you select tags, then look at this. You're looking for, I don't know, a bassinet, then you just go bassinet. So I've just used Control F, and there we go. These are like 957 images about bassinet, bassinet bever, bassinet buckle, lots of different things. So if I click this one, for instance, the bassinet, the general one, boom, now they're all sorted, and they all show bassinets, and then I can keep on going, of course. And it even gives you the date already in the preview. So you can literally like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for instance, because it's between 1300 and 1350, for instance. Or let's say, just try another one. Frog mouth, there we go, helmet, and here you've got 29 images, frog mouth helmet, frog mouth helm, lots of different images that you can choose from. And then we click on this one, for instance, and here they are, frog mouth. So it's excellent already with the tags, but of course you can also do a in-depth search, and so you can choose which countries. Let's say England, Italy, I love this website, Germany. Then we choose male for gender, costume, whatever, the martial and clergy maybe, and then you can select the manuscripts if you want. Say you wanted something from the Maciejowski Bible, Morgan Bible, for instance, or not, and then you can choose the year. So maybe I want to go for something from 1300s to 1450, and then click search, and there we go. You're provided with what most closely fits your parameters of research. I think this is an absolute game changer, and it's really, really good. And so, yeah, that's what I suggest you to use if you're doing this sort of research, and that's how I find all of my iconography for my videos.
It was part of their moral code, just like the other code, a sort of antiquated man code. The code of chivalry was also one that was adhered to.
Antiquated man code is kind of a weird way to put it.
Most of us think chivalry is something that can be found in a Nicholas Sparks novel, but the code for knights was less reminding them to hold doors open for the ladies and more to keep belligerent knights in line.
And just keep him in here
until you or anyone else...
No, not anyone else, just me.
Just you.
Get back.
Get back.
Though there were rules of things to do like live for honor, protect the weak, and respect the virtue.
So yeah, he's making a point, it's fine, it's a little superficial of course, but he's not wrong. What I do want to say though is ask you this question. Look at this sword. Is this an actual curved sword, or is it a very flexible, straight sword that the man is flexing? Let me know in the comments. This is a highly debated topic, by the way.
Issues of women, there were far more rules of what not to do.
Yeah.
Things knights were not allowed to do, as declared by the Code of Chivalry, included beating up priests, taking someone's cattle or other livestock, hurting women, setting
depending
fire
on
to
the
homes,
country
or
and the
robbing,
period.
kidnapping, killing, or doing any sort of general harm to random innocent people. These are rules that we can all generally agree meet the bare minimum of what would fall under the umbrella of chivalry.
Okay, yeah, on the chivalry thing, of course, you have to imagine this. From the position of the authorities of the time, you are literally arming people. Right? You are training them, you are teaching them how to fight effectively, most of the times more effectively than you, although then again, it's true that nobility was trained in combat as well, all the way up to high nobility, but still, let's say you're a king and you're already maybe in your 50s, and yeah, there will be a knight who is in his 20s or 30s, and they are veterans or actual hand-to-hand combat, whereas you have done a few jousts, but yeah, he's better than you at fighting. Also, you are making sure that they have the best equipment. Oftentimes, they have to pay for it, because this is not the Roman army, but still, if they're noble, you know, they have the ability to buy the equivalent of a Ferrari or Lamborghini today. And then they get the honor They get the success and love of the masses. So yeah, you do want to make sure they stay in line. And in order to do that, you create codes to say you will be allowed to learn and improve your martial prowess, your strength, your effectiveness, your sort of weapons, your mastery of weapons. But do remember that you serve me. It is a point, and it is something that authorities will always have as a primary thing. And this is one of the reasons why, for instance, even in ancient Rome, where there was a lot more control when it comes to what sort of weapons and armor and equipment their troops had, because of the fact that troops were so connected to their generals as opposed to, say, the senators or the proconsuls or even the emperor sometimes, then that's why you had rules such as the fact that no Roman legion was allowed to go underneath the river Rubicon in modern Emilia-Romagna because they didn't want legions to be too close to the capital. Authorities always try to avoid coups. So yeah, it is one of the reasons is control of these military men that you are creating. Although then again, it's not just that, and we would have to talk about culture and religion, which are of course intertwined. But as a general statement, is fine. Meals were mostly meat.
Nowadays, everyone is always trying a new diet fad, but medieval diets did not include keto, paleo, or
That's
Atkins,
correct.
And they most certainly never had a meatless Monday. They never had a meatless any day, since meat was the primary ingredient in most meals. Well,
that's nonsense. Oh my gosh. I'll let him finish and then I'll debunk.
most meals consisted of meat and bread because it tasted good. It also was because they thought most vegetables were poisonous.
Okay, yeah. Before we jump onto the vegetable one, all right, let's address first this thing that clearly he's generalizing monstrously in this part of the video. When we talk about medieval food, we have to remember that food varied tremendously, both in time and space. So what this means is that, first of all, the diet and sort of food availability between the early Middle Ages, the high Middle Ages, and the late Middle Ages would have varied tremendously. Also, it would have been not only time-specific, but region-specific, because first, food is seasonal in the medieval period. It's not like today that you can have anything, anytime. But also, there was no globalization, if you will. So, butter would be very easily available in the Nordic countries. Olive oil would be easily available in Mediterranean countries. So at the end of the day, food would vary to an enormous extent between Spain, Italy, Britain, Nordic countries, Greece, and what have you. So making generalized statements and saying, oh, people in the medieval period ate meat all the time, or people in the medieval period did not eat vegetables. I hope he's not going that far, because that would be complete nonsense. But yeah, so there would be a massive variety. Also, the type of food you would have access to would be wealth specific. So depending on which rung of the social hierarchy and class you inhabit. Peasants would have access to certain types of food. Noblemen would have access to other types of food. I have to imagine he's going to mention that, so I'm not going to dive into it right now. But as I say, region-specific, time-specific, season-specific, wealth-specific. So nutrition varies tremendously. And categorical statements like they ate meat every day are nonsense. Now, when it comes to the poisonous idea of a vegetable, I believe it's referring to a late medieval approach to, for example, tomatoes. Because tomatoes, of course, were coming from the New World. They weren't available in Europe. They are an American thing. And so once they reach Europe, some people were a little iffy about it. They were like, I don't know, that looks like it's going to poison me. And so a little bit of a myth spread, we could say. But once again, it might have even been village or town specific, and still it was eventually overcome. So it wouldn't represent the entirety of the population. And as far as I know, that would only have to do with either tomatoes or other food that was coming from, say, the Middle East, so foreign food, if you will. People were a little scary about that sometimes. But also maybe I think I read something about raw vegetables, but that doesn't matter because they would cook them. So at the end of the day, even this idea of, it was poisonous, so they didn't eat vegetables, nonsense.
It's a classic saying that one bad apple can spoil the barrel, but it sounds like back then, someone ate the wrong kind of mushroom or put some poison ivy on their salad.
But then again, mushroom is not a vegetable.
So all vegetables were out of fashion.
Yeah, all vegetables were out of fashion no, sorry, that's wrong, not true. So don't learn that one, please. It's incorrect. And also, it's interesting to say, though, that even the only one here that could be a little iffy It would be the mushrooms for obvious reasons. You got to be careful, and the tomatoes because medieval tomatoes as they reach Europe from the late Middle Ages from America, they didn't really look like the big juicy red tomatoes that we have today. Some would have looked red, some would have looked yellow, but then again they would have been very, very small. And then we changed them. We selectively breed them, if you will. Can you say that? With vegetables, probably not. We selectively produce them in a way that was more appealing to us, but that will take time.
Beware of green salads and raw fruits, for they will make your master sick, was a common saying at the time.
All you need to do to avoid that, even for people who believed it, would be to cook them. And oftentimes people in the medieval period did put a lot of vegetables in a pot and made kind of a vegetable stew. Or used vegetables to create sauces to use on top of fish, for instance. So, yeah.
Meat wasn't cheap in medieval times. Yeah. And since there was no Oscar Mayer bologna to eat in a pinch, the lowest on the economic scale ate pork. That'll do, pig. That pig will do. However, since knights held an elevated social status, they had access to higher quality food than the average serf or peasant did.
Yes.
Beef and sheep were often served to knights along with cheese. Since food needed to be kept safe to eat, a lot of it was pickled or had been preserved with salt, which would certainly make someone thirsty, which is why
they drank constantly.
If they didn't have a Kroger handy, you had better believe they didn't have Evian. So without unlimited access to clean water, the people of medieval times mostly drank alcohol because they knew it wouldn't be contaminated. While we don't have the same excuse today, the medieval knights drank like frat boys, and that often led to worse behavior. All these men drinking beer all the time. They most certainly weren't playing beer pong or flip cup, and this rowdy behavior could sometimes get violent and rather ungentlemanly. Of course, it
is interesting that, like at least in medieval Britain, that's the one I can point out to the sources, but it's possible that this was a case somewhere else too. But at least in medieval England, medieval people in the early Middle Ages did consider beer a meal rather than a drink. That will change, of course, through the Middle Ages, but yeah.
Couldn't drink too much mead, which would fatten them up, because contrary to what you might think of the traditional manly stereotype a knight conjures in your imagination,
many knights cared a great deal about fashion. Yeah, correct.
Image was everything.
Yes.
And since no one was getting likes on their Instagram pages, they had to settle for likes the old-fashioned way. Compliments and adoration.
Right.
But fashion wasn't as straightforward as it is now. There were laws placing restrictions on what people could
like
wear.
The shoes.
Under sumptuary law,
shoes.
Ordinary people were forbidden from spending a lot on their fashion. This cap was instituted to stop peasants and serfs from dressing better than noble people.
Well, only very successful peasants and some merchants.
Like knights, so that everyone could be identifiable by their outward appearance. So knights had to wear nice clothes to distinguish themselves from the lower class. They did this by wearing more elaborate designs.
This is very late medieval,
as well as emphasizing their crotches with large
Renaissance.
codpieces. Yeah, that's right. With no sports cars to compensate, size mattered back then.
Okay, so since he is not expanding on that, I do want to say a thing or two about fashion and outward image in your apparel in the medieval period, specifically for knights. So the idea that medieval knights cared a lot about their image and outward appearance is absolutely true. And this not only happens during, for instance, every day. So if you're invited for a dinner at your lord's manor, of course, you'll dress up with the best clothing you have because, I think we all do that when we go to an important event. If we go to church, oftentimes people put on their Sunday clothing. But what makes it different here when it comes to a sort of categorization of the social core of how medieval society worked is that knights would dress up very well for the joust and for war. Now, for the joust, it means that they would spend a lot of money on their armor and their, coat of arms, and that was because it was a way to show your wealth and also make you noticeable and recognizable by the king. So if the high nobility is watching you and you're like a baron or you are a duke, whatever, you want to show off and show how successful societally you are, how wealthy you are, how much you've been blessed by God, and then people can recognize you like, oh yeah, that's the count, look at that. But in war, this was even more important, because not only you want other people to see you, it's good for morale for your troops that such an important man is with you on your side. It's important in case the king or other nobles see you on the battlefield and they can recognize you. Oh yeah, that's the one with the amazing gilded helmet. That's the Count Metatron. And yeah, look at his deeds. And now people can know and tell your tales of what you managed to achieve and your lance charge or whatever you did, because they can recognize you and your coat of arms and your banners and your heraldic symbolism. But the other reason why you wanted to be recognizable as a high-status member of society with your gilded armor and silver stuff and gems is because it works as an insurance, a life insurance, because your enemy's gonna see that you're a wealthy and important person, and so they're not gonna unalive you, because unaliving you, I hate that I have to use that word, it's so stupid, but unaliving you is detrimental to them because they could capture you alive and ask for ransom and get money, and then you remain alive. So the wealthier you are, the more your armor looks splendid and glorious, the higher is the chance that your enemies will do anything they can not to off you. So yeah, that's good for you. So at the end of the day, as you see, it is double. It's good that your allies see how important and rich you are, and it's good that your enemies, your foe does, because it increases your likelihood of staying alive. And in fact, it makes it harder to deal with you. Isn't that interesting?
No matter how they dressed, the knights still had a job to do. But what was that job exactly? Well, part of their responsibilities included serving in their lord's private military.
Yes.
In some places, like England, knights exclusively protected the king, which effectively made them the national military. Other places, like France, allowed the...
This is strange. No, knights didn't exclusively protect the king. Knights absolutely fought in all sorts of manner, like Wars of the Roses, for instance. You see that a lot. Also, medieval knights in England did tend to fight dismounted as opposed to cavalry charges. They still did them, but not as often or as ubiquitously as they did in continental Europe. But yeah, that's another statement that is very, very strange, very puzzling.
Nobles of the community to recruit knights to protect them, making them more like bodyguards. Regardless of who they served, knights were expected to fight for and carry out the orders of whomever they swore an oath to.
Correct.
Just like Brienne of Tarth, only with a slightly bigger codpiece.
Showed off in tournaments, yes.
Sure, being a knight was a profession, but they generally only worked roughly 40 days a year. Like a lot of modern jobs, there was a certain hurry-up-and-wait attitude. Being a knight essentially meant being on call. Being ready to go into battle or escort their lord on journeys were expected.
Of course, this could be avoided with taxes. For instance, in England, that's something that happened. The knights, instead of having to serve in the military, say that there was a campaign and they needed to go to freaking France, and the knight didn't want to do it, and he's a nobleman, he has money. What they could do is that they could pay the lord a specific tax so that the lord could kind of forfeit the knight's need or duty to fight and use that money to pay for mercenaries to replace him. So that's something that did happen sometimes.
But in reality, these duties were painless and over quickly. Knights had to be on top of their game when they went to battle, but they also had to make sure they were always ready to go, and that came from participating in tournaments. This started as them competing in melees, mock battles where they would fight for prizes. Eventually, those evolved into jousting matches. This later turned into glorified equestrian pageants called carousels, which you will recognize from your years of not wanting to ride it at amusement parks and carnivals as a child. Someone has an issue with carousels. Tournaments weren't open to just anyone. They were exclusively for men of nobility. It was a great honor to participate in them, so no one ever left their invites unread. This was something that they chose to do if asked. Since they had plenty of time being on call, knights had lots of opportunities to compete in tournaments and to earn a little extra dough. They also had more time to court the ladies. Over time, the supply of knights shrank because not every knight could emerge victorious in battle.
Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look, just a flick.
Okay, well, as always, I try not to watch the whole thing. So if you want to watch the rest, particularly the part about sleep, that's gonna be interesting. But if you do want to check out the rest, do click the link in the description, and of course check out the channel, whether I agree or disagree. Still, the content was good to provide an opportunity for further discussion, and at the end of the day, that's beneficial to all of us. Thank you so much for watching, noble ones. I will see you tomorrow for my next daily upload. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.